Welcome to Beyond the Pain, a place for parents of estranged adult children to find peace and healing. In each episode, I hope to share stories to help you during some of your darkest hours, to bring this out of the shadows and stop being ashamed, then to build you up and inspire you to love yourselves even more.
Because our mind generates our thoughts, which generates our feelings. My husband and I used to have we did a couples class.
Yeah.
And one of the things we did was we had, sounds kind of crazy, but we had them negotiate as a couple that they were going to be on a deserted island and they had to figure out the things they wanted to do. And so they're stranded on this island and they have to do these different exercises. Well, then they get rescued by a ship.
Yeah.
And they're all happy and they're celebrating. And then the ship sinks and everybody dies. Then I know it sounds horrible, but then they had to go and write the other person's eulogy and get up and present it to the whole class. And their spouse was sitting there next to them and they were up there just crying and bawling like the grief was real, right? And so what we would do is we would come in and debrief them on this. And the question was, where are these emotions coming from? Because your spouse, they're like, my spouse is dead. I'm like, your spouse is sitting right there.
Right.
That's your spouse right there. Why don't you say these things to them now? You know, so the emotions was being generated by their thoughts.
Wow.
And
That's powerful.
It is powerful. If you become the observer of your thinking, then you're empowered. Your life can change.
Wow.
My life can change. And that's another thing. We do a lot of speaking from I. So, you know, it's easy when people are talking, they'll say, well, you know, you do this and you do that. And it's like, I don't do that, you know, because we take responsibility for our thoughts and what we're saying.
Yeah.
When we say, I think that, I do that, I'm the one. Because it's really easy to, you know, kind of distance ourselves from owning our thinking.
Right.
I hear people say, you know, well, you know, they're upset or they're jealous and, you know, you're jealous. And I'm like, I'm not jealous. Those are your thoughts. So anyway.
If other people, your other family members who weren't aware or didn't know quite as much or whatever, or maybe friends that were close to you and the kids or whatever, when they asked about things, how did you handle talking about it?
Well, again, I'm not above this. One of the things that I personally work on is just not giving away my power. So if somebody thinks about something about me, like whatever, I'd like to say I don't care. I do. I want to be liked. I mean, everybody wants to be liked, right? And we don't want to drive our friends away by just being toxic and talking about it all the time. You know, we haven't really had a lot of that. I mean, people will say, how are your kids? And I'm like, well, you know, we've got some that love us and some that are kind of distant. So, and some, you know, like I think you and I chatted before we were recording. I got a text from the one daughter today, just right before we jumped on here. And I haven't talked to her I've talked to her very briefly. There's been maybe a text here on Mother's Day or on her birthday, I'll text her, but haven't spent any time with her in 3 years.
Wow.
And she just texted us and said, hey, you know, I want to come over and talk. And she wants to come over today. So that'll be interesting.
That will be interesting. You'll have to keep me posted.
The interesting thing is our family was always very close.
Yeah.
And it was when other people came in. I have my daughter-in-law, and then my other daughter has a girlfriend. Yeah. And, you know, it's really interesting. We don't have any judgment on her lifestyle. She does, you know, whatever. She's an adult. She gets to decide who she wants to love and how she wants to live and all of that. And the weird thing is she keeps saying that we have judgment on it. And I'm like, no, I don't. I really don't have judgment on it. Like, I don't,
Right.
you're 30 years old. Like, whatever. And it's almost like, she's feeling that way and it's coming out and she's wanting to put it on us.
Right. It's
And
like sometimes they almost, maybe they don't want it, but they almost want that to be the case.
Yes. And so, but her girlfriend has been I saw it happening before us. She had her cut off every one of her friends. They were in my kitchen and she said, you need to call that girl. And I said, you've been friends with that girl your whole life. And she goes, well, you've even said she doesn't treat me well. And I said, well, that doesn't mean you cut her off. You set some healthy boundaries. That's on you. If you are, you teach people how to treat you. And if you're not setting a healthy boundary with them, then that's your fault if they're not treating you good. If somebody's not treating me good, I say, hey, look, if you want a relationship with me, you need to treat me well.
Right.
And if you're not willing to do that, then, we may part ways. But
yeah.
I watched her cut off everybody in her family, including her other siblings. So the siblings are a little bit, the hard part is our youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had 2 boys and 2 girls, and then we have our oldest daughter, that's my husband's. And the youngest is the one that works with me and spends a lot of time with us. And it's hard on her because she would like to have a relationship with everybody, but they don't want anything getting back to mom and dad. And, she's in the middle, and we're like that too. I'm like, what did they say? I want to know, like, do you know why? And she's like, no, they won't talk about it.
Yeah.
And
poor kid. That's got to be hard.
Yeah. I mean, she's 26 years old. She's engaged. She's getting ready to be married. She's like, do I invite him to my wedding? Like, I love my siblings, but I haven't heard from them. She hasn't heard from them either.
Right.
So
I know our oldest daughter, when she got married, was during the middle of the estrangement, and she chose not to invite my son. And then when we all got back together and was talking again, that was something that he was very hurt about. But it was like, well, you cut everybody off. So we had no way of knowing where your head was at, whatever. I don't know what she told him exactly, but he was upset about it. I'm like, I begged them in the beginning, him, to not let what was going on with us affect his 2 sisters. I just really asked him not to do that, and it did. So it's like, what do you do? Again, they're adults.
Yeah, it's really, and the thing about responsibility and empowering others to be responsible is they also have the consequences of their choices.
Yeah.
So, if they cut us off, and, we've had questions about our finances and our trust.
No, I agree. And, part of the several people I've talked to, and a lot of people in the Facebook group that I'm a part of, that I'm one of the admins in, that question comes up a lot, and I see various answers. Oh, I will cut them off. No, they're done. They don't want anything to do with me. Great, that's their decision, whatever. And then there's the other side of the coin. Well, I can't do that. I feel like, they'll know when they get the inheritance or whatever. And I'm like, I don't really have to worry about that because I don't have really much to give. So when I'm gone, but I think I would be more on your side of the coin of that too, because for the same reason, if I'm not worthy of even a mention or even a visit or a call from now and then why? What purpose does it serve, I guess, to do that? And not that I would do it to be spiteful necessarily, although I'm sure part of that human nature is, but again, why I wouldn't give it to my neighbor across the street. And if they're about the same as that, then just because they may have come from my, DNA, doesn't make them necessarily close enough to be sharing that with. That's my personal opinion. So,
Well, I think there's also sometimes kids, and this is just my own personal view. I haven't read this. I mean, there's nothing backing it. I'm not a doctor or anything. But I have noticed when I go back and look at my own early adulthood, there was a breaking away from my parents.
yeah,
Because they still wanted to parent. And I noticed when I went back to my parents' house, I still kind of went back into childish behavior. And so I remember kind of having a sort of a breaking away from them so that I could really like stand on my own. Like, I don't need them.
right.
There was something in my brain that it was like, I don't need them. And then I had to, and I moved to Arizona. My dad was just heartbroken. And I was like, I'll be fine. He was worried about me, of course. And I think I was 22 or 23 years old.
Yeah,
And I'm getting in my car driving away from Nebraska. That's a long way. And he's
that
like
is.
standing in the driveway crying. And I'm,
Oh,
and I'm like, it'll be fine, because at 23, I knew everything.
you knew everything.
And
You haven't learned a single thing since then because you knew
I
everything.
knew everything. And anything that I didn't know, I just made up and said I knew it.
Right.
So anyway, I do remember then when I started to have kids kind of stepping back in and going, oh, now I want them in my life. I want
Yeah.
them around my kids. I want them to be grandparents. And unfortunately, my parents were older when they had me. I was the baby.
Yeah.
And
Me
so
too.
they didn't, by the time I kind of figured out I wanted them around, they were very elderly and that wasn't possible. And I do believe our kids will look back at some point and go, man, that kind of sucks. I lost a lot of time with mom and dad. Because I think our kids will come back.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe they won't. I don't know. But I'm really over giving it a lot of emotional, because after losing a child, and then for
Right.
them to do this, it pisses me off, quite frankly. And I don't know if
For
I can say
sure.
it on here, but I get pissed off about it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the emotions you work through. There's so many of them. But yeah, I mean, I was angry on a number of occasions, and sometimes it would be for, I mean, something I couldn't even quite put my finger on, as what triggered it. So,
Yeah.
um, but you definitely run the gamut. So,
No, I was just, having a son that died and they watched what we went through.
oh,
And then I flip it and I go, well, they went through that too. It was their brother. So that actually caused a lot of challenges in our relationships with them because they didn't think we handled it as, like I was very selfish in my grief. I really was. I just didn't know how to navigate it.
right.
And it was like being on the ocean. I always say it took me 3 years to get my sea legs with it, to be able to stand correctly. And so it's kind of like when I'm in emergency mode, I have to take care of myself to make sure that I'm good. It's kind of, you heard the thing of if the oxygen mask falls, do your, get yourself right first, and then you can help others. But if you're not right, you can't. And so I went through that. But for them, Emma was 16. So by the time I kind of came out of it, she graduated high school. She was in college.
Mm,
Those were very formative years. And not that I completely neglected her, but I just
right.
wasn't emotionally available for some of the things she was going through. And I've talked to her about it, and she's like, Mom, it's fine. Like, I know it was
Yeah.
just really hard on all of us. And, so I know the older kids, even though I haven't really had a chance to talk to them in that depth, like I do Emma,
Right.
they're very, um, I'm sure they have issues around that,
Yeah.
you know?
For sure. For sure. Well, I mean, yeah, and I never actually thought about it until you mentioned it, flipping it and looking at from their lens, so they obviously, you know, from a different perspective, had uh, some other issues too with your son passing. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's just that's a terrible thing. Um, so back to the estrangement, and obviously early on, because I know you've worked through stuff. Not that you don't still necessarily think about it, but um, we've talked about your. Um, well, let me. Did you experience like physical pain along with the emotional pain for the estrangement part?
Well, as I said, we've gone through, we went through the grief recovery,
Right.
and that's one of the things they call it accidents and injuries.
Okay.
Um, it's very, very common when you're grieving to actually create. And when I say create, I don't mean like you're consciously doing it, right?
Right.
It kind of goes back to that grief app where it's running all the time in the background and it's draining you. And there's also it can draw your attention elsewhere. And so you may not be present like you need to be if you're driving or if you're walking or if you're doing something. It's easy to have accidents.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm very aware of that. Again, it goes back to that awareness. And so um, I don't think that I've had that. I mean, I've
Okay.
always had fibromyalgia. I had that years
Mhm.
ago. I had a friend that was murdered, and that
Wow.
was an ugly thing that I went through. And it kind of helped prepare me for this,
Yeah.
quite frankly. But um, I got fibromyalgia after she died. And I had it for a few years. It was hard to navigate, and I wasn't sleeping. And, when you don't sleep, it can cause physical pain. So I'm
Sure.
going to say no, I haven't from this.
From this.
But
Okay.
after my son died, I mean, yeah, I
I'm
just
sure.
didn't feel good all the time. And, I was tired and not sleeping. And I think that's normal in grief.
I think so. I know I've talked to, a number of people that they do, and even with me, a lot of the emotional stuff just caused physical issues
Mhm.
with me. So I know it's pretty common. Not that everybody does it, but it's, common. I'm probably with you having the background of having the tools that you've talked about from your counselor, probably helped navigate some of that too, to try to not go through some of that. So
Well, just the one where could you let it go? Would you win?
yeah.
That one, I mean, whenever I feel, when I realize, oh, I'm carrying it again, it's like when you realize the app is open on your phone, you close it, right?
Yeah.
So close the app, and then I do well for a while, and then I realize, oh, I picked it up again. Dang it. Because, and even with the estrangement, I pick it up, I put it down. I
Right.
pick it up, I put it down. I have more, my anger is more geared towards their spouse, that they have been, and my child, my adult child, my jumbo shrimp there, listening to somebody else, it, and I don't know what else said, but I've observed behavior
Right.
that is very controlling, um,
Right.
almost like I want to be the only one in your life and you're spending too much time with them. So, you need to stop that kind of thing.
I have a very good friend. She's not estranged from her child. Well, not yet. Um, but his new wife, and they just had a child, um, is going through exactly that. She's isolating him from everyone. The mom can only, I mean, that she only gets to talk to him on the phone when he's like not around the house because the
Yeah.
new girlfriend or wife now gets upset, and it's sad, that it's like that, and that they allow them to do that, and that so many people in the world are going through that. So it's oof,
Yeah. So there's an insecurity there that,
yeah,
um,
for sure.
they're concerned. And with both of them, I've done a lot of coaching, and sometimes I coach when I shouldn't. It's that me putting my cape on,
Right.
and I'm like, wait, what did you just say? Like, I have a tendency to call people out, which isn't great. I mean, and so they know that I'm on to their behavior.
Right.
And so that doesn't help, because now they're like, and of course I didn't realize this until after the fact, but now they're like, ooh, she's on to me. Like, she can see me. She can
Right.
see this. And so they
Better
have
get
to,
her out of the picture. Going through the estrangement, have you come through the other side with like anything positive that has come out of that for you?
oh yeah, lots of stuff. I would say the number one thing, my husband and I both have, it sounds funny, but we've worked on loving ourselves. And I hear people say, love yourself more, love yourself less. I don't look at love that way. I think love can expand. So maybe more, I
Sure.
don't know. But as a human, I think it's very important that each one of us loves ourselves. Because when we love ourselves, we want to do more and be better. And we want to expand that. We have more to give.
Yeah.
And it also is more of what I would call an outward focused. Um, Love is outward focused. If I'm, Mother Teresa, she was just taking care of business.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like I'm focused on myself. I love myself, like, nothing
Right.
weird about it. But just like having that, how can I care for others if I'm not caring for me? I have to care for myself and take care of myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, it's been the weight, because like I said, I gained 55 pounds, and 10 years later, it's like, I mean, I've gone up, I've gone down, I've gone up, I've gone down, and I'm doing the yo-yo thing. And so the weight has been, my drug of choice has been food, to medicate myself. And so looking at that and going, it's a choice in every moment.
Right.
And instead of looking like at the whole thing, it's like, take care of myself. And my husband too, because he's always been a giver. We lived our whole lives, raising kids and taking care of kids. And I won't fix the lawnmower because this kid needs to go to college, and I got to help them with that. And
Right.
so, and not saying that's not love, but it's just time for us to take care of ourselves and do some things for ourselves. And I think that's a positive. For me, that's a positive, because
For sure.
otherwise you could just keep going on and on until the day you die, and, give away everything you have to people that are willing to take it and not do anything for yourself.
Someone else just brought that up to me recently. A friend, daughter of a friend who happens to be the same age as our kids, but we've grown very close. And she asked, well, what does Don like to do? I'm like, I don't know. um, always been worried about being a father and a husband and whatever,
Yep.
but not just me. So I have to get back to you on that. You're right. It's like we're so busy doing all this other stuff that we are the last thing on our mind. So definitely starting with ourselves, loving ourselves, and being kind to ourselves, and then you can push it out from there.
Yeah.
So um, if your estranged child was listening right now, is there anything you'd like to say?
I love all my kids very much. I want the best for them. I want them to be happy. If this makes them happy, then that's their choice. I want to support them in being adults. I don't want to be the parent anymore, any more than they
Right.
want to be the child. And so I want them to, I mean, part of having freedom is you have freedom, right? And
Right.
so I want them to have freedom. And if they don't want us in their life, that's their choice. They have the freedom to do that. I do believe that it's a mistake. I think at some point in their life they'll look back and go, gosh, because the only reason I think that is because I've done that as an adult, right? I've looked back. I remember my dad called me. I was in my 40s. I was building a real estate empire, right? And he called me and he goes, I was just thinking about you today and I was busy, right? And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, good, Dad. Thank you. I appreciate that. And he said, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the businesswoman that you've become. And
that's awesome. That's awesome. We don't always get that. So that's really cool.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Take your time. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I think with some of the tools that you've shared with us from your experiences, that it will definitely touch some people. So I appreciate that. I started this about 3 years ago now, and just with the intention of trying to help one person, to not go through some of the things that I went through, or at least to know that they're not alone, or whatever you want to put in there. So
Right.
It's been very important to me. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, I got a little choked up there, but I think when I look back on that, my dad passed shortly after that. And he was sitting in his chair in Nebraska watching the squirrels or whatever he was doing and reflecting.
Wow.
And I have found myself doing that. When I look back to that moment, it's like I could have stepped away. I could have taken lunch. I could have listened to him and really been appreciative. And I was a young woman. I was, driving my business, and I was just like, all right, Dad, whatever. And I really do think my kids will have those moments. And those moments are emotional. They're not fun to carry because I don't have that opportunity now to go back and, talk to my dad. So he's been gone.
Yeah. You may never know that they have them, but I'm sure they will. How can they not? Even if they don't express it for themselves, somewhere in there, and maybe I'm naive, but somewhere in there, gotta think that they will have that moment of reflection. So,
well, I know my kids, and they're actually amazing adults. I mean, people meet them, they love them. They're like, wow, they're so responsible, and they're, and so, it's not like they're just spoiled brats, that's not the case. And again, we've had fights in front of them that we shouldn't have had, and we've done things we shouldn't have done. And but the best thing we can do is work on ourselves, and hopefully that they see that we're human beings and we're faulty. It's just the way it is. So I appreciate what you're doing, because it has helped me. I binge listened to your podcast. So that was great. And, hearing other people and being able to connect with their stories. And, I don't always see it exactly the same way, but it helps me see, like, oh, okay, maybe I can look. I always try to look at it through my kids' eyes. Like, what are they seeing that,
Yeah.
So it's helpful. So I appreciate everything that you're doing on this.
So I'd like to thank Michelle for coming on the show. I really appreciate the insights you were able to give some of us, and I hope that things work out well for you and your estranged child. Please, if anyone else would like to contact me, feel free to email me at beyondthepainpodcast@gmail.com. Also, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the videos. It really helps. And comment on the videos. So again, I appreciate all you guys listening, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.